Welcome back to my channel. Today's episode is about clarinet mouthpieces and the tip openings, or tip openings in general, because I'm going to show examples of saxophones also. This will be the second step as we learn more about mouthpieces. We'll be splitting clarinet and saxophone mouthpieces later for refacing them, learning how to do minor tweaks to them, not necessarily total refacing yet, but we'll learn how to do that later on. But today we just want to learn about the tip opening and what we do to actually measure the tip opening. That is very important. So what I have here is a set of my mouthpieces. And I'll be turning on my other camera here in a second. But what we use this tip gauge that we have here. It's in millimeters, and we'll show a close-up of it in a minute. But when we do these, we also use this is a piece of glass really that we put on top of the table at the tip, and then we measure the tip opening here. Now, of course, many can say, oh, we can just use a caliper for that. We can, but it's very hard to get the caliper in there to properly measure it. Measuring how much we can push this in there gives us a more accurate amount. This is from a old Ralph Morgan mouthpiece facing kit. Comes with a piece of glass, and it comes with a actually several of these metal things that are used for determining how thick a gap is when you're doing the facing of the mouthpiece. I've expanded it, and I've gotten basically a kit for a spark plug, for spark plugs. So I have a complete set here of really thin gauges going to, what is this, 0.4 millimeters or 0.4 millimeters? It's 0.0015 inches. Really thin to get really accurate facing measurements. But we're going to change cameras now. What we have here up close is we have this one gauge. See the measurements there? And on it, it has numbers. And at the 100 mark, we'll find out that it is there's a measure at the 100 mark. It is, as we can see, essentially 1 millimeter. And there we go. So how we do this now is when we have a mouthpiece, like this one as an example, you flip it upside down. You take your glass piece that you have, and you can't get these anymore, but you can get similar ones out there. Want to put it on here, and you'll see it has numbers on it. This is for helping to measure the facing later on as we get to that. We're going to do a couple examples here just for this video. Keep it short. Then we use this, the tip gauge. Kind of let it slide in underneath. And this comes up to about 110. Next example I'm grabbing is an older Selmer, an HS circle on the table. Measure this up. And we're getting about 102. Next up, this old buffet mouthpiece is a C crown. And it comes up to about 130. Next up is this older buffet mouthpiece. It's a real nice sounding mouthpiece when I use it. Comes up to about 120. Next up, we're going to switch here. We have a O'Brien mouthpiece, crystal mouthpiece. Just as a sample here. And it comes up to about 125. Next, I have another old vintage O'Brien mouthpiece. And this comes up to about 95. So we may be more familiar with Vandoren mouthpieces, which I have a bunch here, a couple older ones. This is an M13. Comes out to about 103. This is a Vandoren B45. Comes out to about 120. This is a 2RV. Comes out to about 109. This is a 5RV. And it's about 116. This is a 5RV Lyrique. I think they call it. I can't remember. Needs a little bit of cleaning. Has some plastic on it. And about 117. Now let's do a couple of saxophone mouthpieces real quickly. This is a tenor sax mouthpiece, a C sharp, Selmer. Just for comparison. It is about 153. This is another tenor sax mouthpiece, a Selmer C S80D. So there's the C sharp, C double sharp, and then a D. And this one was way in there. It's about 152. Wait, 192. This is a Selmer metal mouthpiece, jazz ones, an E tip. It's been worked on before. Wasn't even, now it's even. Look at that, about 238. And this is a Koff Jazz 8-star R. About 248. But what can we learn about this? Well, we know the larger the tip opening, basically the more volume of air you can put through the mouthpiece. But we also learn in the next episode, the facing curve will have a lot of impact on the hardness of reed that you can use. The facing curve could be short, could be medium long, or it could be long. So this would affect how the reed vibrates, whether it's vibrating a short amount, medium amount, or a long amount. And all these mouthpieces have different facing curves. They're designed for different purposes, and they react with the reed differently. In general, though, the larger tip opening you have, the softer reed you use. And the smaller tip opening you have, the harder reed you can use. And as we move along to the next episode, we'll learn more about the facing curve and how the reed gets impacted on that. We'll also have another episode more about sax mouthpieces, but it comes really into play too with clarinet mouthpieces, is we're going to start learning about the insides of them too. We're going to talk about the rollover baffle, if it has a rollover baffle. Talk about the side walls that can actually be scooped out. On saxophones, you see that a lot. We'll get down to the throat and throat shape and its dimensions. It could be basically like a vertical H, as they call it. It could be a wider H. It could be like an A frame or wider A frame. The larger the throat, the more air volume can go through it, and the less restrictive it feels. So there's a lot to mouthpieces, and we're just getting started about it. In the previous episode, we also reviewed looking at flat tables by using a razor blade or something that we know is flat and a light source behind it, and checking to make sure there's no light between the razor blade at various angles and the table. I think we showed a table that was concave in the middle. And there are some mouthpieces actually designed, especially clarinet ones, we'll get to that later, where there's a dip in the middle here and it holds the reed with the proper ligature, holds the reed right here, front and back. But I hope we learned something about tip openings. Once again, we use this wand here that had markings on it, as we showed you earlier, so we can measure the tip opening against this pane of marked glass, which we have from a Morgan mouthpiece kit, which I don't think are available anymore. I bought this, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years ago. But I want to thank you for listening to my ramblings. Any questions or comments, put it down below. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and share, because you gotta love the knowledge, you gotta love life, you gotta love clarinets and clarinet mouthpieces and sax mouthpieces. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.